don't think we have speakers here, so I'd like to start the panel discussion with two speakers that we have. So first of all, some questions to Keisha. Anyone from the audience would like to put their question?
You said about the organizations giving letters to be about what you described in the letters. And I had because the letter was sent back for the person saying that, oh, we don't believe all these letters, whatever you have sent in. Because this was not the court, but it was the after the pre-interview, and the letters was given, and rejection was based on that we don't believe all these letters which you are fabricating. So, what is the stake on that? Because the Home Office had to, if they don't believe a letter, they should call up because they have got the numbers and the email address. They can drop us a line saying that, can you confirm whether we gave these letters? So why is it a snapshot, some background people sitting down and sending out these letters?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. There isn't a straightforward answer for it, and unfortunately the Home Office is not entirely consistent either. So you often get caseworkers accepting letters in one case and not in the other. What I would say.
The burden of proof is on the asylum seeker.
Yeah.
So that's the excuse they use to say that you should not only present the evidence, but you also should present verification of the evidence that it's generated. So that's their.
How you are going to
And normally they get given a right of appeal, so the cases go before the tribunal. So at that stage,
it's going to cost them a lot of money, isn't it?
I mean, it's costing a lot of money. So I'm going to move on to the topic. I mean, at the moment, the British government, although they are cutting a lot of funds in relation to health services, education and so on, the Home Office has been investing a lot of money. Home Secretary has been investing a lot of money into the immigration decision making, and they are making, poor quality decisions, and they get often overturned by the tribunal, and we are trying to fast remove the asylum seekers quite quickly after refusing them on shoddy grounds because the asylum is a politically charged issue.
I think the success rate on appeal of these sorts of cases can be quite high, as long as the evidence is there and any problems that are set out in what's called the reasons for refusal letter. That's the letter that you're talking about is the letter that an asylum seeker is given when the Home Office sets out the reasons for rejecting their account, and they then would get a right of appeal. If there are clear reasons given in that letter about why the Home Office don't accept that letter, then of course it's important for somebody to address that in front of the judge, possibly by providing a further letter that addresses whatever concerns were in it. If it's possible for somebody from your organisation to go along to the asylum hearing and actually go in front of the judge in person, that is hugely helpful as well. I realise that a lot of your organisations are rather stretched and strained, and that you might not be able to send someone along in every case. But if that is an option, that's certainly something that would help. And in terms of, just briefly on the funding issue, you're right, of course it's hugely expensive, and these are often people who've had to come with very little of their assets with them. So I think the point was made earlier on about the incredible generosity of the diaspora community here, and I think we really see that in asylum cases. There have been drastic cuts to legal aid provisions, and while asylum claims still are within the framework for legal aid, which means you can get legal aid for asylum cases, only certain solicitors have a legal aid contract, which means that there aren't nearly enough legal aid solicitors to go around for the number of people that need legal advice. So often people are having to pay a lot of money to have their claims decided, and then of course to pay to lodge an appeal with the courts as well. And I know a lot of clients that I've worked with have only been able to do that because of the generosity of extended family members and other members of the community groups that are supporting them.
Thanks for your outline of the current situation. You said that the recognition rate was relatively high at Central or whatever, but surely it's rather a small number of people who are getting access to the asylum system here, and I don't suppose they're getting access to it from Sri Lanka or other places abroad. So I think you'll have to nuance that point a bit. So relative to, say, 10 years ago, when there were more people getting access to the asylum system, there are other small numbers getting access of Sri Lankan talents getting access. And surely a bigger issue is that of family reunion, of getting people reunited with their families, their wives or whatever, wives and husbands, of people who are already here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who may have been, of course, asylum seekers in the first place, the people who are here now.
Yes. Well, you're right that the numbers have dropped. I mean, if you look at in fact, this is something that he sets out in his paper, broadly speaking, not just in terms of Tamil and asylum and Sri Lankan claims, but the number of asylum claims in the UK generally has dropped significantly since just over 10 years ago, when it was at an all-time peak. But it is on the rise again.
Because of the success of the British government in stopping people from getting into a flight, basically.
Well, that might be part of it. I think there are a number of different factors at play. It also depends on the political situations in countries that people are fleeing from as well, of course. In terms of accessing the system, of course, one of the kind of impossibilities of asylum and refugee issues around the world is that you can only seek asylum when you're in a country of refuge. You can't claim asylum at an embassy for the most part. One obvious exception to that currently in the Ecuadorian embassy here in London. But for the most part, you can't claim asylum in an embassy. So there, of course, will be a lot of people currently in Sri Lanka that would be entitled to refugee status if they were only able to leave Sri Lanka. And in the UK, of course, it's there are tighter controls now in France than there were several years ago. And because we're an island, for the most part, people can only get here by flying. A common problem has been people being prosecuted for possession of false documents, people coming in on forged passports, and that's something that continues to rise as a problem for people. You shouldn't be prosecuted for arriving on a false document if you declare it straight away, but nevertheless you do still find people being arrested and tried for those issues and even going to prison for those charges here in the UK too. In terms of family reunion claims, that's something that comes with the benefit of refugee status, that of course entire families often can't flee as one unit. Often it's one individual from a family that comes to a country of refuge, and after their status is secured, they're then able to apply to bring their family members in. One of the problems that people often face in that regard is that the asylum system can be so long drawn out, cases can take so long to come to conclusion, that then causes problems when they have to try and demonstrate that their relationship with their spouse is still ongoing and still subsisting. And no doubt it also puts emotional strains on those relationships as well.
One of the main reasons Britain left European Union is immigration. The other one is European Court of Human Rights ruling. What is going to happen when the
European Court of Human Rights is not part of the European Union.
It's not going to happen?
No, it's not part of the, because it's part of the European Council, Council of Europe, but it's not part of the European Union.
Even if they left the European Union.
It's not going to change. Anyway, but that's the perception amongst the people that you are right in that.
And it could change. I mean, that would be something, a matter for our government to try and implement. Certainly while we're part of the EU, it's not possible for us to withdraw from the European Court of Human Rights because it's a requirement of being part of the European Union. But if we pull out of the EU, we won't be pulling out of the Council of Europe. I don't know what Theresa May's current view is on that. Actually, she's kind of backtracked a few times on the issue.
I think
Too many issues.
I'm not sure.
Please, give you a question.
they said they wanted to come out of the European Council, the Brexit of the European Council of Human Rights. Is that possible?
Well,
Or how is that? It will affect the asylum.
yeah, it's possible. I think who knows what's going to happen. I think over the next couple of years, a lot of things are likely to change. Hopefully that won't. But
Yeah, it is possible, but it's up to the political leadership to decide.
So until then, it won't change anything
Yeah,
in the asylum.
yes. It's like Brexit. Now, until the Article 50 has been triggered, and that's a 2-year period has been completed, as far as European Union nationals in the UK are concerned, nothing has changed. They all remain the same.
maybe just finally on that, just to clarify that the right to claim asylum isn't attached to our membership of either the EU or the Council of Europe. Those are our international obligations under the Refugee Convention. So that shouldn't be affected by that.
If we leave the Europe under the European legislation, there has been some progressive steps about processing asylum claims, and those pieces of legislation are going to be undone, and therefore there could be some indirect implications for the asylum seekers in terms of the fairness with which the Home Office decides these cases, and there could be some changes to the another immigration status asylum seekers get called humanitarian protection.
And you
That's-
elaborate on that.
I mean, because we are also, because of our membership of the European Union, we have incorporated a European directive on asylum procedures. So that sets a sort of minimum standards that you have to decide asylum applications within a certain time scale. And if they are not able to make a decision within a year, they should get work rights and lots of procedural rights that have been brought home because of the membership of the European Union. So when the Brexit happens, those rights are going to be taken away from the asylum seekers.
They're going to take it away.
Yeah.
Would there be any possible changes in the policies in case Mr. Jeremy Corbyn becomes Prime Minister?
Labour politician is here, so we can answer.
Yeah, it is because the policies are depends on power, the leadership and the party.
Yeah, it depends on the politician.
It depends on the government at the time, and as far as Jeremy Corbyn is concerned, that you know where he stands, what his values are. So therefore, there may be possibility.
Yes.
Yeah, my question is there a self-regulating mechanism within the operators, okay? Because oftentimes we hear from the applicants how they are being made by the so-called asylum firms or whatever, right? Because it is true. If you, this chap I know, he said he paid £17,000 and still waiting, hasn't heard about his application. I have heard more than that, just not one individual case. So I'm just wondering, is there a way we can at least inform all the applicants that this is the procedure how you can meet your payments? For writing a letter, it is £200 or £400 or whatever. Because this is where the unfortunate, these guys are working 24 hours, some of them, just to meet the bill of these firms. So that's why my question, that prompts my question, is there a way we can, educate religiously, having paid enormous amount of money.
I think you're right, and I think this is a problem, and there isn't a set fee that would apply to all solicitors. And solicitors are regulated by the Solicitors Regulation Authority, the SRA, and they all have to be compliant with SRA regulations. There are also immigration advisors who might not be qualified solicitors, who need to then be regulated by what's called the OISC, which is the Office of the Immigration Services Commissioner. And any immigration advisor that isn't regulated by one of those two bodies shouldn't be giving legal advice or representation. So that's the first thing to look out for, I think.
You have to mention the Bar Council.
And the Bar Council, yeah, of course, as barristers we're regulated by the Bar Council. For the most part, people don't come directly to us, but they normally go through solicitors, but that has changed in the last few years. But I think unfortunately people seeking asylum are a particularly vulnerable group of people because they're foreigners by definition, so they're not familiar with the system in general, and often also not with the language of the UK. So I think that puts people in a position which makes them particularly vulnerable to being taken advantage of, unfortunately. There are a lot of very good immigration firms out there. Unfortunately, these cases take a lot of time to prepare as well, so those firms really are stretched.
Educating the asylum seekers is I don't know whose responsibility. I think community organizations can play a great role. So regulation is